USA SDA is in the last trump in the book of Esther. And this is a Bible study, not a sermon, so we'll continue. How many of you remember the first part? Yeah. It's hard, so she wanted a little bit of a review. Yeah. And so the first 8 verses in the book of Esther, in chapter 1, we saw 5 subtle allegoric connections and references to the United States of America. Starting with this allegoric reference. You know what an allegory is, right? It's a story to teach a hidden meaning. And so that's what we're seeing in Esther. You know, Esther's a history book, but it's really, once you see all the signs and symbols in it, you're no longer looking at the history book, and you're seeing all the signs and the symbols, and that's what we're picking out of the book. And so in the very 3rd verse of the whole book, we started with this first of the 5 subtle allegoric references to the United States. It's mentioned in a prophetic time period in the Bible. Esther 1, verse 3, we read, "In the 3rd year of his reign, King Ahasuerus made a feast unto all his princes, and it lasted how many days?" And so we found out that 3, another word for the word third is 3. 180 days is half of a year, so we have a 3.5-year period already alluded to. Now that's not what the historic side of this is trying to say, but if you look at the allegoric side of this, 3.5 years. It's subtle, but when you add all these subtle references, you see that they become strong. And so here we're referring to the 3.5-year time period, which is mentioned 7 times in the Bible, the 1260-year prophecy, which ended in 538 AD to 1798. Yeah, 1798. 1798, right. And 1798. Okay, that was the first of the subtle references. Then we looked at, as we continued on, the very next verse told us that the new feast, he started a new 7-day feast that was not in the palace anymore. He moved it into the garden. That's in the earth. And so the lamb-like beast, the United States, in Revelation 13, it comes up out of the earth. He moved to the garden in the rural setting. The United States came up out of the unpopulated area, or as the Bible calls it, out of the earth. And then we saw that the pavement upon which they celebrated, in King James at least, was red, white, and blue. And I know a lot of other versions were different, alabaster and all these weird colors. King James, Textus Receptus, it was, besides the black, there was red, white, and blue. That's the color of the pavement in the garden where they're having this new feast, the 7 day, after the 1260 years. Red, white, and blue. That's the United States of America. Okay, then it went on to say in the next verse that they were, in this feast, the king was having them drink out of vessels that were different from each other. And vessels represent people. Saul is a chosen vessel. People are vessels, and here we are talking about a diversity of people. What country is known as a diversity of people, or the melting pot of the world? The United States of America, again. It's unmistakable. And then it says, lastly, we read that the drinking out of these diverse vessels was not forced. It was not mandatory, and as the King James says, not compelled. Nobody was compelled to drink. They could drink or they could not drink. We found out that drinking represents practicing your doctrine. And then in the United States of America, we have our First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. You can worship any way you want. That's what the reference is saying in Esther. Drinking, not compelled. Practicing your doctrine, do it if you like it, don't do it if you don't like to. And so the 3.5-year time prophecy, it ended in 1798. And what country was it that is ascending into power around 1798? Again, the United States. All right, and then, so that's a little bit of a review. And last time we closed with Esther replacing Vashti. Let the king give her, Vashti's royal estate, her queenship, to another that is better than she. Right? And that, we know, is Esther. Esther replaced Vashti. And what was Esther better at? Now, be real specific. What was she better at? What would she be better at than Vashti? Remember, Vashti was called to come into the king's presence on the 7th day, the Bible says. Very clear. She came on the 7th day, and what did she do? She refused to come on the 7th day. So a lot of people think, well, she just disobeyed the king. No, she refused to come at the call of the king on the 7th day. Right? And a woman represents a church, doesn't it? All right? So Esther wins the beauty pageant and becomes the king's new queen. Woman represents a church. Vashti represents a specific church because it's a personal pronoun. It's a specific name. So what, and this is more review, but what church did Vashti represent? What church refuses to come on God's 7th day, in fact, and even thought to change times and laws? Yeah, the Roman church. All right, and what church did Esther represent? Esther is, what is her race? If Jews are known for anything, they're known for keeping God's 7th day, right? If you just had to name one doctrine, what do Jews believe? Let's see. Well, of course we're going to say it. Well, they believe like Adventists do. They believe in the 7th day Sabbath. And so Esther represents, to answer the question, let's ask another question. You have to answer this question first. Is there a church established after 1798, that was our time reference period in Esther, that has answered a call to come before the heavenly king on the 7th day? Is there a church that has done that? And this, I would call this the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it's more of an extension of the Reformation, isn't it? This is the last lost doctrine of God's 10 Commandment law that's being brought back into light. We are the repairers of the breach, as Isaiah speaks. The repairers of the breach. We're just like Martin Luther, who repaired the breach in his respect. Seventh-day Adventists have a role to play in that Reformation too. So Esther actually represents Revelation's remnant church. It's a perfect match. Esther in the book of Esther and the Revelation's remnant church in Revelation 12. The characteristics of Revelation's remnant church are they keep God's 10 commandments, all 10 of them, and they have the testimony of Jesus. That's what the Bible says. Now, the Seventh-day Adventist Church was established after 1798, and they keep all, well, we're supposed to be doing that, right, Jan? Keeping all of God's 10 commandments, including that one that is kind of says remember, that one right there. A lot of people have forgotten that. Not to say that people from other denominations aren't salvageable. We have just as much a need of mercy and grace as anybody in the Presbyterian, Baptist, Catholic Church. We have heaven-bound people in all those. Those are following God to the best of their ability. But you remember now, another little bit of our review, we found that in the book Acts of the Apostles, a little commentary on what we were talking about, the church has God's supreme regard. God's church, his remnant church, holds his supreme regard of all things on this earth. And we also learned that it was a theater to the world. What's a theater? It's a place where you kind of show something. I'm going to show something. You go to the theater, we're going to give you a message there. It's a theater to the world. That's what the Acts of the Apostles commentary was on God's church, on his remnant church. Do we see King Ahasuerus bestowing supreme regard upon his new queen, Esther? Oh, he adores her, doesn't he? Right? Yeah, that's what you see in the theme of the book of Esther. He adores his new queen. Has God shown supreme regard for the Seventh-day Adventist church, for the Seventh-day Adventist people? My answer to that, you shouldn't get me started, but I'll get myself started here. I can answer that in 4 words. Health, wealth, growth, diversity. Ambitious human beings generally aspire to these 4 things. We want to be healthy. How many of you like to be healthy? That's an aspiration, a general aspiration for a human. Healthy, we want to make money. We want to be wealthy and prosperous. We want to grow. We want to get better as time goes along. Also, we want to appeal to as wide a diverse group of others as we can. Diversity. And that's generally what we aspire to. Did you know that the Seventh-day Adventist Church holds 4 world records in those 4 categories? Of course, in health, you might already know that. Health, we are the Seventh Adventist Church has the longest living people on planet Earth. We always say it's the longest living Americans, but Americans have the longest living people. Longest living Americans on Earth are the Seventh-day Adventist study, and a government-sponsored study of Seventh-day Adventists. This is a U.S. government, not a religious organization, studied on it's the Adventist Health Study, and a lot of you may have participated in it. They found out that Americans that are Adventists live 11 years longer than the average American. Now that's not just 2 or 3 years. They started out in the first Adventist study with like a 3 or 4 years longer, and they thought that was amazing. Now they're finding it's 11 years longer, that's significant now. So the longest living Americans, that's a world record. Oldest people, the longest. I don't know if that's good for us, but we didn't do it on purpose. Okay, so that's health. And as far as wealth goes, again, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has the highest paid graduates from any university in the world. Loma Linda University, again, did you know they have the highest paid, they were studied, highest paid graduates. Better than Harvard. You graduated Harvard, didn't you, Robbie? Stanford? No? Yale? I know he's one of those because you're pretty smart. But Harvard wasn't even on the top 25. They were out of sight. You know, Harvard, Loma Linda was el numero uno. The average was 73,000. I graduated there, and I brought the curve way down because my opening salary was way lower than that. But the highest paid graduate, okay, so that's health and wealth, and then growth. The Seventh-day Adventist Church in a USA Today study found out that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the fastest growing Protestant church, a growth rate of 2.5%, while other evangelical churches are declining in numbers, in America at least. Declining. They're going down, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church is actually growing in the United States at that rate. But then over in the world, it's growing much faster. In Africa, in Nigeria, I think Nigeria is the 5th largest country in the world now, and a lot of them are Adventists. In India, our Bible studies, you saw that little ad I started with, we're running Bible school ads, and Nigeria and India are #1 students there. Thousands and thousands of people online with Desire Media from Nigeria and especially India. And okay, so that's growth, fastest growing, and then diversity. Did you know, now Pew Research, which is a religious organization, they did a study and they found out that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the most racially diverse culture in the world. A close second above the Muslim culture. That means there's more people from different countries around the world in the Seventh-day Adventist Church than any other culture in the world. Seventh-day Adventist Church, and you see it when you travel to different churches. There's just especially in Southern California, there's just you have no idea. There's 230 recognized countries, and they're all there in some of these churches, it seems like. Seventh-day Adventist Church is that church. They hold those 4 records. Jesus says, or the Bible says, commentary on that, Acts of the Apostles says, God's church is a theater. God doesn't just do this just so we can be all excitable and happy and proud of ourselves. No, he does that because the church is a theater of his grace where he delights to show his power to transform hearts. He wants people to join his church. God is using this to call the world's attention to his bride. Yes. The church is his bride, and it's just another way, one of his many ways to call the attention. Another little fact about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and this is probably nobody else studied this, but I noticed it, is that we were having a meeting. We were at an ASI meeting, and we sat with this lady that worked for the General Conference in the IT department. Alex was interested because Alex is in IT now, but he wasn't back then. And she told us, hey, a little interesting fact about that General Conference. It has never been successfully hacked, which is, that doesn't sound all that great maybe, but the United States government, for instance, has about 77,000 hacks per year, successful security breaches, cyber security breaches, and we're constantly working to save that. General Conference doesn't worry about that. They got some good ITs that are clothed in white robes, you might say, and God is protecting this. He's protecting the General Conference network system To protect, why do you think that is? Why do you think he's protecting it? Because of the missionaries in countries that are not recognizing Christianity as legal. And so a lot of times people are trying to find out where are some of your missionaries. And by the way, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has more missionaries than any in the world than any 5 other denominations combined. Seventh-day Adventist Church. Small group compared to the Baptists, say, and there's a lot of Baptists out in different countries too, but not like the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We've got thousands of them, way more than we have just members in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's only like 1.5 million Adventists in the United States. Most of them, of the 23 or 4 million Adventists, are all overseas. They're all in Africa and then Central Asia and all that area out there. All right. The key difference between Vashti and Esther was this. Esther came on the 7th day. Well, it doesn't say she came, but you know she's going to come because she was Jewish. She hid her religion, but she is Jewish. The key difference is that she obeyed. She came on the 7th day. Now, the great controversy in page 605 tells us that at the end of time, and you're wondering what the big issue is going to be about, here it is, the Sabbath. I mean, make no mistake about it, right? The Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty, for it is the point of truth, especially controverted. It's going to be the main point, the main controversial point. And so, if you don't believe me now, wait, if it does happen, then you can believe me. Fair enough, right? So my grandpa told my dad, he didn't believe. My dad told him all about the Sabbath and about the mark of the beast and all that stuff that we believe. And my grandpa said, that'll never happen. But he said, if it does happen, then I'll believe it. If I see it happening, I'll believe everything you told me about the Adventist Church, and I'll believe it's true. And so then he said, fair enough. That sounds fair. So the key point that differentiated Vashti, his former queen, and the new queen, Esther, was the 7th day. All right, here's another quiz question. Lumi will know this, maybe. Maybe Lumi will know this. But how were Esther and Mordecai related? What was their blood tie? No, that's what our children's stories always tell us. Uncle Mordecai, No, that's not how they're related. It's in chapter 2 and verse 7 of Esther. They were, I don't know if you don't have time to look it up. I shouldn't have said that because now everybody's looking. Maybe somebody over here said it already. Yeah, he was Mordecai's uncle's daughter, which makes them first cousins. First cousins. But he adopted her, so he was more of a father figure to her. But they were actually first cousins. After her father and mother died, he adopted her. And so, speaking of Mordecai, here's where we can bring Mordecai in. Now, another real key figure, maybe even more so than Esther, is Mordecai. In Esther 2, verse 10, it says that Esther had not shown her people nor her kindred. She didn't tell King Ahasuerus before she won that beauty pageant that she was Jewish. She didn't say that because why didn't she do that? Yeah, Mordecai told her not to. He charged her that she should not do that. And so we wonder sometimes, how can we say she's a pure, representation of God's remnant church if she's being a little deceitful? Was she being deceitful? Yeah, no? Was Jesus being deceitful when he would heal somebody and say, tell no one? Was that a little bit deceitful? No? Now, 9 times we see that in the Bible where Jesus would heal somebody and he would tell them not to make it known to everybody. Don't broadcast this and advertise it. Why did Jesus do that? Yeah. So as the, Desire of Ages tells us, is so as not to cut his work short. He wanted to do as much work as he could, and it would cut him short. In fact, with the healing of a certain leper, Desire of Ages 264 tells us that the leper's act of blazing abroad the matter resulted in hindering the Savior's work. Can you think of a reason why that would hinder him? He heals a leper, and the leper, he says, don't tell anybody that, about this healing. Just go to the priest and show, give the little offering. And then the leper just runs off and screams, I've been healed. He's telling everybody. He just published it abroad. What would that do to Jesus' ministry? That's exactly right. So the priests and Pharisees would be angry, and they would incite more of their bias, and they would work harder to prevent his ministry. Another reason, and Desire of Ages tells us, that other lepers are going to be crowding around him, and of course that would drive everybody else off because lepers have cooties. Did you know that? Bad cooties, they thought. Other lepers would crowd around him, and it would ramp up all the enemy's efforts against him by publishing his. And that's why Jesus says, "Don't tell anybody. Just keep it quiet." Yeah, that was good. Now, like if we do a Revelation seminar and we advertise for it, like with a handbill or something, we don't say on the very headline of the advertisement, "The Seventh-day Adventist Church is holding a Revelation seminar." Are we being deceitful by not showing that up front? Why do you think we do that? Yeah, because of the bias. What we want to do is get them to that first meeting where we talk about Daniel 2, and we show from the Bible that we're studying. We see the future based on the Bible's predictions. And once people they come to that meeting, they find out, man, these people, they really are teaching the truth from the Bible. And then their prejudice is subdued a little bit. All right. Now, in the 1880s and the 1890s, did you know Sunday law enforcement was very severe? And in fact, a lot of people were wondering, is this really the mark of the beast time now? It's 1880s, 1890s. That's when they wrote all those blue laws on blue parchment paper, respecting Sunday observance. Yeah. In the 1880s and the 1890s, enforcement was severe in the South. And people were asking, the Adventist church at least, is refraining from work on Sunday receiving the mark of the beast? Okay, here's the answer that this was posed to Ellen White. Last Day Events 138, the answer came that you need not, see, they were worried about working. If I refrain from doing my laundry or mowing my lawn on Sunday, am I conforming to these Sunday laws? The answer was, you need not cut your work short by yourself laboring on Sunday. Refraining from work on Sunday is not receiving the mark of the beast. That's kind of good advice, isn't it? I mean, isn't that nice to know? Hopefully that's a practical little tidbit of information that might help you guys in the future. That helps me, In places where the opposition is so strong as to arouse persecution if work is done on Sunday, let our brethren make that day an occasion to do genuine missionary work. And the key word is work, right? You're not resting, you're working because you're doing missionary work. The best of all work there is to do. If they should come here and say, close up your work, your presses on Sunday, I would not say, no, keep your presses going, because that conflict does not come between you and your God. So Mordecai, he tells Esther, don't tell them you're a Jew, because you're going to find this is going to be kind of a useful thing. You'll see. And I don't think he even really knew, but God knew. God inspired Mordecai to tell Esther, don't tell them you're a Jew. And she won the beauty. You think she would have won the beauty pageant and became the queen if she had told him? Who knows, huh? But I think Mordecai was thinking, no, she's going to be in a position, a useful position for God in the future. I can just see it. And we don't want to have anything stand in the way, so don't tell them that you're a Jew, because that could stand in the way. It might disqualify you from even running for queen. Running for queen. Can you imagine that? We're running for queen. And the lesson is God's people are to use discretion. And Jesus himself said, be wise as serpents. Be smart when you do your missionary work. Harmless as dove, but wise as serpents, without compromising the truth. If it comes to compromising the truth and discretion, don't compromise the truth, of course. All right, so that's the lesson there. Now, let's talk about assassination attempts. That's a big theme in the book of Esther, isn't it? In chapter 2, verse 21, the Bible tells us, now Mordecai, he sat in the king's gate. He was sort of like the greeter out here at church. He sat in the king's gate. That's an important position. So whoever does that, you're like Mordecai. You can look up to anyway, Mordecai, he sat in the king's gate, and while he did that, two of the king's chamberlain, Bigthan and Teresh. They sought to lay hands on the king. These are the assassins, the attempted assassins. Bigthan, I like that name for an assassin because it sounds like a big dude. Bigthan. He's a Bigthan and Teresh, but these are the assassins. And here is another case where we see that the Persian kings had to deal with assassination plots. Another little subtle allegoric connection, though. But do we know a U.S. president that has had to deal with assassination plots? Right? No, we only know about President Trump to be President-elect Donald Trump. We know about two main ones, but there are a number, many more assassination attempts that have been failed so far. But we know of many, but the foundation to all these includes an Iranian, what nation did I say? Iranian vow to assassinate Trump, or at least bring him to trial so they can hang him like we did to Saddam Hussein, because he executed Soleimani, their main general for the extreme radical Islam efforts and terrorism. You know, Trump was responsible for the assassination of Soleimani, and that settled the deal, didn't it? That settled the dust on on a lot of the terrorist activity. And so they have made a vow to get him back. They say to bring him to justice, but that means execution. So they're trying. So what country? Here's another little allegoric connection. What country is Iran today, or Persia today? I just gave it away, didn't I? Persia is the country. Is Iran. Okay? Iran. Bigthan and Teresh were Iranians. Do you see another an allegory maybe pointing to our time and the United States? It's interesting to note that in Esther, just before God's people face a death decree, there's an assassination attempt that is providentially thwarted. Okay? Mordecai overheard the plot, and he thwarted the assassination attempt. Was there a failed assassination attempt here on a U.S. president recently that was providentially thwarted? A couple, right? Remember, he's playing golf. Trump is playing golf, and a Secret Service man playing a hole or two ahead of him sees a gun barrel pointing out of some bushes. You're not supposed to see that. A gun barrel. And what did the news that says that he opened fire on the guy? He didn't even, hey, who's there? He didn't say that. He just took out his gun and started shooting. You know, that's like my dad. He would do that. My dad would be a good Secret Service agent because he shoots first and asks questions second. I mean, you think it's funny. My dad actually will shoot at people if they're threatening him or his family. It's amazing. Should I tell a story real quick about that? This is because you're laughing, but you don't know the half. My dad came home one day, and this happens a lot, but my dad came home one day and his window was broken out of his truck. I said, Dad, what happened? He said, well, there were some people on the freeway, a group of migrant workers and illegal aliens, we'll say, and they were harassing some old folks. They were honking at them, and they were drunk or something, and they were honking at them and swerving at them and giving them a hard time. And he said, I didn't like that, so I went over and I honked at them. So then they started to attack me. So they swerved in front of me, and so I said, well, oh yeah? He pulled out his gun and just fired right at him. He said, I thought the window was down. And so unfortunately, he just shattered his own window from the inside. And he said the bullet hit the top of the car. It's a .45, Colt .45, that's what he carries. He puts it right in his pocket. And when Dad goes out to work on the ranch, he puts his .45 right there, kisses his mom goodbye, and gets in his truck, and off he goes, cowboy hat, and boots and everything. And then, if some trouble comes up, he's Matt Dillon. He handles it like the old West way. The bullet hit the top of the car, put a dent in the car, and luckily it ricocheted off and didn't hurt anybody. And he said those people turned white, hit their brakes, and off they went, off the side of the road, and they just were gone. They wanted nothing to do with the crazy gringo anymore. Anyway, that was totally not called for, that story. But I couldn't help it. So a failed assassination attempt on a U.S. president, providentially thwarted, and also, again, okay, Trump, this is the main thing that evangelicals are seeing as far as providence is concerned. Remember at Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump in a speech here is giving a speech, and then the assassin fires off a round right exactly at the moment Trump turns his head, and then you see the little graphic over there showing where the trajectory probably would have gone. It would have been a kill shot up here, but when he turned his head, it was it just winged him in the ear. And people were calling that providence. Providence. And so we saw that in our first message. We saw that everybody thinks it's divine ordination. President Trump, it's a calling from heaven. But so in Esther, an assassin attempt takes place just before the death decree for God's people. Or could it be that we are close to the end of time? Now, is a death decree coming for God's people? And it's coming, and it could be soon. Just before the second coming, that's one of the last things that happens, a death decree for God's people. Comes in the time of trouble, and we've studied also in that, and there's some good news in that, is that God's people cannot be killed during the time of trouble. Did you know that? A little tidbit of information that should be comforting to us. I hope that's comforting. Prophecy tells us that God's remnant church has a death decree coming. That's in Revelation 13. Verse 15. Now, could this happen right after an assassination attempt on a U.S. president who is slated for death by Iranians? You see all the different things? U.S. president, yes, slated for death. He has a death decree, or a little bounty on his head. From a country, the Persian country, which is now Iran. Right? So now let's talk about religious liberty and see another. Now this is the most important part, and we'll try to wind it up quickly here. But let's talk about religious liberty and see another allegoric connection. Religious liberty, that's an important thing, isn't it? Mordecai saved the king, right? And there was no reward given him. Isn't that interesting? No reward for Mordecai, that was important. And at the same time, happening at the same time in the story, a guy named Haman is promoted to power. In Esther 3, verse 1, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the highlighted Agagite. That's Alexander Scorby, Agagite. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gates were commanded to bow and reverence Haman. So there's a law, they got to bow down. Just like you do the king, you got to bow to Haman now. Now, who do you think that Haman would represent in this whole allegoric story here? The adversary, yeah? Right, so we have the king who represents God sometimes, and we have Esther, represents Revelation's remnant church. We have Vashti, would be the apostate church or Babylon, and then we have Haman, represents Satan. I mean, he's a good representation of Satan, right? He represents Satan more than he represents himself, I think. Haman, and he's called an Agagite. Does anybody know what an Agagite is? A descendant of King Agag, which was an Amalekite. Agag was the Amalekite king who survived King Saul's extermination campaign. God said, go and exterminate the Amalekites. The Amalekites and the king. But he survived it. King Saul refused to kill him. So Samuel did it. Little old weak Samuel did it. But were Amalekites, were they friends with God's people? Have you studied your Bible? No, they were not. They were not. Their sole reason for existence was to kill Israelites. And even when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, Amalekites would prey on them and try to kill them and pick them off and weak, and they were ruthless, like hyenas. That's not very nice to say about people. Hyenas are like that, though. Hyenas will try to kill weak things, and and Amalekites. So that's Agag. Haman, the Agagite. The Amalekites' sole reason for existence was to kill Israel. Is the country ever? I hate to say this because I actually have Iranian friends. Okay, so But are Iranians, are they predisposed to want to destroy Israel? Not as people, but as a nation? Oh, man. So they are the number one sponsor of terrorism, and their number one goal is Israel. Let's kill Israel. That's their whole life. Death to Israel. You see it on the news. I don't know why they don't hide that, and how could that be popular among like students in different universities? They pick up on this. It's contagious. So I would say there are Iranian principles that are preoccupied with killing Israel. Not to say Iranians are bad people. I've got some good friends that have escaped Iran, and they were actually Jewish Iranians. In fact, that story I told in Sabbath school about that angry driver, remember I told you that story about that angry driver? I was coming out of that I just got a car from the Iranian people who were actually Jewish Iranians, and they escaped during the Ayatollah Khomeini's. And so anyway, I don't know, they were Jewish, but they had to escape because it's not very friendly to them over there in that country. All right, so bowing to Haman, would that be a problem for an Israelite? Bowing to another man? It was for one particular Israelite, wasn't it? It was to Mordecai. The Bible says Mordecai won't bow. Mordecai will not bow down to Haman, which stirs up a little bit of a controversy in chapter 3. In chapter 3, in verse 3, it says, "Then the king's servants said unto Mordecai, Mordecai, why are you disobeying the king's commandment and not bowing down to Haman?" Why is that? And the reason is because of his religious convictions, right? You don't bow down to another human being, right? You save that for Jehovah God, you save that for him, and his religious convictions prohibited him from doing that. And that brings pressure from the king's servants. See, I highlighted the word servants, the king's servants. The servants represent the government officials. Are God's people going to be forced to make a decision between God's law and a government law at the end of time? We see that in prophecy. The mark of the beast issue is about a man-made law versus God's law. That is the big deal right there. Mordecai's refusal to bow stirs up enmity. It makes people mad. It makes Haman mad. Will God's people experience the same thing? They will. In fact, here's a little commentary on this mark of the beast issue. It says that the whole world will be stirred with enmity against Seventh-day Adventists. Why? Well, they will not yield homage to the papacy by honoring Sunday. While legislators are calling for laws to respect Sunday, one group resists that. That's kind of like another little Martin Luther deal there. We're going to be the ones resisting calls to respect a certain day over God's Sabbath day. And so now watch the next verse. Mordecai makes a religious liberty appeal. And this is interesting. It'll tie into the United States. Esther 3, verse 4, it says, they spoke to Mordecai daily. They spoke to him over and over unto him about this whole issue. You're not bowing down. Why not? Well, he didn't listen to them. He hearkened not unto them. And so they went and they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. And what were his matters? What was his reason for not bowing? He told them he was a Jew. And he has a pretty good a reason for not bowing. And so can you see the religious liberty appeal here? Mordecai's matters, or his judicial defense. Now, you say, well, judicial defense, the king said you got to bow. Well, no, not in Persia. Did you know that in Persia, in the Bible, Persian Empire had religious tolerance laws? Did you know that? And how do I know that then? Did I just make that up? No, I didn't just make that up. You see that in Daniel chapter 6. In Daniel chapter 6, it's the Persian Empire. Daniel 6, remember with Daniel and the lions, Daniel and the lion's story. Daniel and the lion's den. Daniel in the lion's den, the reason he was thrown into the lion's den is because they made a temporary law that says you cannot bow down and worship any other god except for the king for How long? 30 days. What does that imply about before the 30 days and after the 30 days? You can bow down and worship any god you want before the 30 days or after the 30 days. That's unheard of in any pagan nation. Every pagan nation in the Bible, except for Persia, had laws where you had to worship the state deity, which is always the sun. Pagan worship is, and the sun, that was the god, and there was no loophole. You don't have any right to do what you want to do. You got to obey the state rule. Persia didn't have that, obviously, because we know that from Daniel 6. What a unique article of legislation, right? That was unique. Again, that's where the United States entered. What is the unique article of legislation that our Constitution contains? It's unique to any other country. First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Mordecai's matters represent the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. That's Mordecai's matter. Mordecai's matter. He had a religious conviction that you cannot bow down to another man and say, and they respected that. They said, let's see. Well, let's see if his Mordecai's matters will stand. And he wasn't executed for not doing that. They had to change the law. They had to change the law in order to get Mordecai in trouble. Revelation 13:11, it calls the United States a lamb-like beast. Freedom of religion is what it's talking about. It's a lamb-like beast because it's like Persia. It allows religious freedom. The principle of God's or Jesus' government is religious freedom. You can drink or not drink if you want. No one is compelling you to worship God. He asks us and invites us to, but he doesn't force us to. Esther 3:4, we find that the Persian government is a type of the United States government. All right, we're almost done. This is only part 2. We got a part 3. Somebody was asking. There's a part 3. That's when we're going to wind this whole thing up. The best is yet to come. But in Revelation 13, it tells us that the lamb-like beast, the United States of America, it speaks, it's like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And it says here, the Seventh-day Adventists will fight the battle over the seventh-day Sabbath. The authorities in the United States that used to have religious tolerance because of our First Amendment, and in other countries also, they'll rise up in their pride and power and make laws to restrict our religious liberty. And that's what it means in Revelation 13:11, where it says the lamb-like beast changes and speaks like a dragon. The dragon is the devil, and the devil is coercive and forceful. All right, so Haman and Vashti are not done yet. Revelation 13:11 is really a prediction that the United States is a prediction. You can mark it down and see if those crazy Adventists are right. The United States will repudiate their lamb-like qualities and restrict religious liberty. Hate to say that, don't you? I hate the idea of, because this is what's so good about America. This is why it's a melting pot from people all over the world, is because of that First Amendment. People want to come out and have freedom, a church without a pope, and a country without a king, of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is the whole deal here. We can worship as we choose. Sunday is our mark of authority in church. The church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. That'll end up being the big showdown. So, quickly, Jan. Mordecai's liberty, they're overthrown as the story goes on. And Haman gets a law not only to exterminate Mordecai, but who else? Everybody. Everybody gets called. All of God's people now are subject to a death decree. Right? A death decree. And so that's when Mordecai appeals to Esther in Esther 4:14. Who knows whether you have come to the palace or for the kingdom for such a time as this? She's in the right place at the right time now. And last slide. Esther says to King Ahasuerus, "Let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request, for we are sold to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish." What happens to God's people in Revelation 13? Same thing, death decree, sold to perish by the dragon, by Haman, by the dragon. Esther 7 goes along perfectly with Revelation 13 with this one little added detail. Someone in the right place at the right time to help God's people. And we can probably expect that to play out. And so let's make an appeal. Let's quit. The sermon is over, or the Bible study. This should be the prayer of God's saints during that time, at the end of time. Let my life be given me at my petition, and my people we're sold to be destroyed and to be slain. In the time of trouble, will God's people be praying something similar to this? We're going to be praying. And as our text said, will not God avenge his elect, who cry unto him day and night? Will God elect him or avenge them, the elect? Why is it that we go through trials? Why does God allow these trials to go? We're going to go through some really horrendous things at the end of time. And why is it that you think God allows those trials? Strengthen, I hear it. Strengthen. Did you know trials are absolutely necessary to redeem us, to, I want to say harden, but to commit our faith, to make it solidified for eternity, established. For our faith is going to be established through trials for eternity as we go into eternity as ambassadors for Jesus Christ. And so my appeal would be, are you willing to allow God to let you go and take you through trials in order to establish your faith? Is that your prayer? That's my prayer. But let's say, God, I give you permission to do whatever it takes. But also, we can also add in, but be as gentle as possible, right? Is that okay to pray that? But don't hold back, but be easy on us, right? And God is easy on us. Did you know that? God is really easy on us. I see it all the time. God is merciful, but he does take you through those necessary trials. And when we see those trials, we know they are necessary from a merciful, loving God to establish our faith through eternity. So I hope that's the prayer in our heart. And when we see those things coming, we can say, hallelujah, this is for my good. Amen?